They said I was too sensitive and overreacting for leaving the family chat. I quietly bought my own place. Now they're all asking me to host Thanksgiving because I. Funny how silence works better than shouting. And funny how people only start seeing you when they want something. For years, honestly decades, I was the invisible one in our family group chat. I don't mean ignored in the simple way, like messages left unread. I mean actively minimized. Mocked. Every time I spoke up, whether it was about a hurtful joke, a snide comment, or just trying to share something meaningful, I got the same chorus. Lighten up, Alan. You're overreacting. Classic Alan, always so dramatic. The worst came from Uncle Roy, the family's self-proclaimed comedian. If I ever dared to be sincere about anything, he'd hit back with some passive-aggressive quip like, "Did someone forget their emotional support blanket again?" And everyone would laugh. Everyone. Except me. I'd spend days replaying those conversations in my head, wondering if I was just too sensitive. Maybe they were right. Maybe I should have developed a thicker skin. That's what my mother always told me. Don't feed into it. You know Roy. He doesn't mean anything by it. But intention means nothing when you're the punchline. Then came the night everything shifted. It was after a long day at work. I was exhausted, emotionally raw from a difficult client meeting. I opened the family group chat out of habit, just as my cousin Tyler posted a throwback photo from our last family barbecue. There I was, mid-bite, looking awkward and half asleep. Someone captioned it. When Alan hears someone say therapy. The laughter emojis poured in like confetti. Uncle Roy added, "Poor guy's been healing since 2003. You'd think he'd be done by now." That was the moment. Not because it was the worst thing ever said, but because I didn't feel anything. No anger. No shock. Just tired. Like my soul finally stood up and quietly walked out of the room. So I did the same. I left the chat. No announcement. No confrontation. Just a silent exit. And that silence? It changed everything. No one noticed at first. Or if they did, no one said anything. Not for days. Maybe even weeks. Then my sister, Melanie, finally texted me. "You left the group chat? That's a little dramatic, don't you think?" I didn't reply. 2 hours later. "Seriously, what's your problem?" Still nothing. Then came the voicemail from Mom. Her voice carrying that familiar mix of exasperation and forced concern. "Alan, I saw you left the family group. You know Roy's just joking. Honestly, you have to stop taking everything so personally. We don't want to walk on eggshells around you all the time." Eggshells. That word again. Like standing up for myself was some crime against peacekeeping. Like their comfort mattered more than my dignity. That's when I made the decision. Not out of spite. Not even anger, really. Just self-preservation. I stopped responding. To texts. To calls. I didn't block them. I wasn't interested in theatrics. I just let the space grow. I focused on work, put in late nights, took up running again. I bought nicer groceries. Started sketching. Music played through my apartment constantly, like I was soundtracking the version of me that I'd buried under family noise for too long. And then, I started house hunting. It wasn't planned. I was browsing listings one night, a random curiosity, and then I saw it, a craftsman-style home on a quiet street, tall windows, sunlit kitchen, and a backyard that felt like a secret. Something about it made me pause. I visited it the next day. I didn't tell anyone. No updates on social media. No big news announcement. Just me, and the realtor, and a key that eventually landed in my hand. It became my sanctuary. Each room painted in colors I picked. Shelves filled with books I loved. The living room had warm lighting, plush chairs, a fire pit out back. Every detail was chosen, not inherited, not compromised, not negotiated in a family group thread where my opinion was background noise. It was mine. And then, one Sunday morning, I got a text from my cousin Ellie. "OMG, is this your place?" Attached was a photo of my kitchen, reposted by a mutual friend who'd visited for wine and charcuterie the night before. Within hours, the group chat I wasn't in anymore was buzzing. And just like that, the family that never heard me suddenly wanted to talk. By Monday afternoon, my phone was lit up like it had just won the lottery. Missed calls from Melanie. 2 texts from my mother, first one asking how I'd been, second one demanding to know why I hadn't shared the news. A voicemail from Uncle Roy, surprisingly short and almost cautious. "Hey Al, heard you got yourself a place. Congrats. Give us a call sometime." It was surreal. No one had ever asked where I lived before. For years I was probably in that shoebox apartment somewhere downtown, as Roy liked to say. Now, suddenly, I was the center of attention. The family group chat I had left was full of questions I wasn't there to answer. Where is it? How big is it? Did he really buy it on his own? Then came the kicker. Melanie again. "Mom says we should do Thanksgiving at your place this year. You've finally got the space." Finally got the space. As if the only thing stopping me from hosting was square footage, not years of being treated like I was disposable. I didn't respond. I sat with it instead, the message glowing on my screen like an invitation wrapped in insult. If I had any doubt about what they valued, it was gone now. I was useful because I had a big dining table and enough chairs. Because I could accommodate. Because it would look good. That's when something cold and precise settled into me. I wasn't going to reject the invitation. I was going to accept it, with terms of my own. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed, "Sure. I'll host Thanksgiving," and hit send. Not out of kindness. Not out of forgiveness. But because I had just realized I didn't want distance anymore. I wanted clarity. I wanted them to sit in the home I built without them. To smile and eat and pretend nothing ever happened, while every single detail around them whispered the truth. It wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical. The first thing I did was walk through the house with a notebook in hand, not to see what I needed, but to decide what they would see. I envisioned the entire evening like a director blocking a scene, where they'd sit, what they'd notice when they entered, where their eyes would land when silence fell between courses. I wasn't planning a meal. I was building a mirror. For the living room wall, I had a custom print-made, elegant serif font, subtle matte frame. It read, "Too sensitive to take your BS." No quotes, no attribution. Just the words. Hung it right above the couch, where everyone would sit with their cider and pie. Then came the seating chart. I made it neutral enough to pass for hospitality, but I was careful with the assignments. Cousin Ellie and her fiancé? Center of the table. Mom? Close enough to the kitchen to feel awkward asking for help but not close enough to micromanage. Uncle Roy? No place card. It wasn't missing. It was absent. The exact kind of absence that makes people uncomfortable in all the right ways. I left a narrow gap between Cousin Tyler and Melanie, just wide enough that someone would eventually ask, "Wait, where's Roy sitting?" The menu? Traditional, yes, but elevated. Brine turkey. Herb roasted root vegetables. Homemade cranberry chutney. Pecan tartlets. A meal polished enough to say, I care about the people I welcome into my home. And just cold enough to imply not everyone qualifies. The final detail was the toast. I wrote it weeks in advance, rehearsed it until I could say it like it had just occurred to me. It wasn't going to be cruel. I didn't want revenge that sounded bitter. I wanted something cleaner. Something they'd feel in the silence after it was over. Because this wasn't a tantrum. It was an exhale. They showed up on Thanksgiving afternoon in waves, like they were pacing themselves for drama. First came Melanie, all high heels and store-bought wine, glancing around the entryway like she was taking inventory. She smiled a little too hard. "This place is, actually really nice," she said, as if surprised I could pull off drywall and color coordination. "You did all this yourself?" I just nodded. No need to answer questions designed to measure how impressed she should be. Then came my mother, clutching her purse like it was armor. She stepped inside and looked around with a hesitant smile, pausing for half a second when she spotted the print above the couch. I watched her eyes scan the words, too sensitive to take your BS, and then quickly shift away, like she hadn't seen it at all. She didn't comment. Good. That meant she understood. Everyone trickled in over the next hour. They brought side dishes wrapped in foil and the usual mix of tension and small talk. The compliments came in cautious waves. Wow, Alan, you've really got an eye for design. This neighborhood must have cost you a fortune. Is that real marble? Each one was a backhanded attempt to reclaim the narrative. We're impressed, so we're still in control. But they weren't. And then, Uncle Roy walked in. Late, of course. Always late, like he expected the party to wait for his entrance. He stepped into the dining room, scanned the table, and paused. Where am I sitting? He asked, voice light but edged. I looked up from lighting the final candle. I wasn't sure if you were coming. He laughed, short and awkward. Of course I'm coming. I'm the life of the party, right? Silence. A few eyes darted to me. I met his gaze. Calm. Even. Well, Roy, I said, you're welcome to stand. Or find a stool in the garage. No one laughed. Not this time. He gave a tight smile and muttered something about just grabbing a folding chair. He ended up wedging himself at the far corner of the room, near the coat rack, balancing his plate on his lap. The table had exactly 12 place settings. He was the 13th. Dinner moved along like any other holiday meal, on the surface, anyway. Laughter, clinking silverware, people talking over each other. Melanie passed the rolls with performative warmth. My mother complimented the stuffing twice, carefully avoiding eye contact with me. And Uncle Roy? He ate silently, perched on his makeshift seat, his knees nearly touching his chin. I barely spoke. Just refilled glasses, cleared plates, carved the turkey with methodical grace. I wanted them to see it, the version of me that no one had ever bothered to meet. Not bitter. Not broken. Just peaceful. In control. Settled in a life built without them. Once dessert was plated, spiced apple tarts, not pie, I stood up with my wineglass. Before we finish, I said, tapping the side of the glass gently, I want to say something. Forks froze midair. Heads turned. My sister gave me a wary look. Roy stopped chewing. I've hosted a lot of things in my life, help, patience, second chances, but never a dinner like this. And I'll admit, it feels good. Nods. Smiles. The beginnings of claps. I held up a hand. But what feels even better, I continued, voice steady, is knowing I did it all after walking away from things that hurt me. There was a stillness that crept into the room, slow but undeniable. Sometimes you spend so long trying to belong somewhere that you forget you were never really welcome to begin with. You convince yourself that if you just stay quiet enough, helpful enough, forgiving enough, someone will notice. Maybe even appreciate you. I looked around the table. Slowly. Let the silence stretch. They noticed, eventually. But only when I had something they wanted. The room was silent. Melanie shifted in her seat. My mother stared down at her napkin. Uncle Roy cleared his throat, suddenly very interested in his tart. I'm grateful, I said, lifting my glass slightly. Not for the family I was born into, but for the one I've learned to be for myself. I didn't say cheers. I just took a slow sip and sat down. No one said anything. And for the first time in my life, I was perfectly fine with that. After the toast, something cracked beneath the surface of the evening, not loudly, but unmistakably. Like a bone settling into place after being dislocated for years. They tried to pretend everything was normal. Melanie forced a smile and said the dessert was gorgeous. My mother murmured something about how I must have picked up cooking from those YouTube videos. Even Roy, who once couldn't resist making everything a punchline, stayed quiet. His fork scraped the plate louder than his voice did. I didn't say much after that either. That was the power in it. I didn't need to. The silence I used to dread, the kind that once wrapped around me like shame, now felt like insulation. Not loneliness. Just distance. Chosen. Earned. The framed quote above the couch caught more than a few glances that night. I caught Tyler standing beneath it, reading it twice with a smirk on his face before he muttered, "Huh," and walked away. Ellie asked if it was from a book. I told her it wasn't. By the time people started grabbing coats and folding foil over leftovers, the tone had changed. There was no laughter echoing into the hallway. No one clapped me on the back or said, "Same time next year." Instead, I got compliments that sounded like confessions. "You've done well for yourself. This place, it really suits you. You seem different, Alan." In a good way. I just smiled. Let them feel whatever they were starting to feel. Regret. Realization. Discomfort. It wasn't my job to name it. When Roy shuffled over to say goodbye, he gave me a limp handshake and a forced chuckle. "Guess you proved us all wrong, huh?" I looked at him, not angry, not smug, just steady. "No," I said. "I just stopped trying to prove anything." He left without another word. And when the door finally closed behind the last guest, I stood in the foyer for a moment, listening to the soft tick of the hallway clock. No mess. No tension. No version of me I'd have to apologize for in the morning. Just quiet. And this time, it was mine. The next morning, I woke to an unusually quiet phone. No texts. No late-night photos. No memes about how full everyone was or best turkey ever. Just silence. It wasn't the kind of silence I used to dread. It was the kind that follows a shift in gravity, after something has tipped and can't go back to the way it was. I walked through the house barefoot, coffee in hand, each room still holding the warmth of last night's gathering. But not the chaos. No forgotten jackets. No lipstick stains on wine glasses. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. Later that day, Melanie finally cracked. Her text came through around 2 p.m., plain and direct. "Was that toast about us?" I stared at the screen, took a long sip of my coffee, and typed only 2 words. "Was it?" She didn't respond. By Sunday, the family chat had resumed without me. I knew because Ellie forwarded a screenshot. My name came up twice, once from my mother, who said, "Well, Alan clearly needed to get some things off his chest," and once from Roy, who apparently referred to the quote on my wall as passive-aggressive decor. That made me laugh. Not bitterly. Not out of spite. Just honestly. They still didn't get it, and that was fine. Because they felt it. That much was obvious. What they didn't realize was that it had never really been about them in the first place. It was about me. Taking back my own narrative. Building something in silence, not to flaunt it, but because I didn't want to need their approval anymore. For years, I'd begged in subtle ways, trying to be included, trying to be respected, trying to be heard. And every time I stood up for myself, I was told I was being dramatic. Too sensitive. Overreacting. But it turns out, being too sensitive just meant I noticed things they wanted to ignore. Being dramatic meant I refused to normalize being disrespected. And overreacting? That was the name they gave to boundaries they didn't like. So I made new rules. Not spoken, not texted. Just lived. That house? It wasn't just shelter. It was proof. Proof that I'd stopped asking to belong in rooms where I had to shrink. That I could make something beautiful, without their laughter, their permission, or their hand-me-down approval. They were guests now. Temporary. Peripheral. They ate at my table, under my roof, surrounded by my silence, and if it made them uncomfortable, good. Because maybe now they'd feel what I'd felt for years. By the following week, the ripple effects were in full swing. Melanie posted a filtered photo of her plate from Thanksgiving with a caption that read, "Grateful for family, even the complicated ones." A dozen likes, a few generic heart comments. But buried in the thread was one that caught my eye, and Diane asking, "Where was Roy sitting? Didn't see him at the table." He didn't reply. And that was the thing about all of it, no one wanted to admit what really happened. Not out loud. They'd rather spin it into some cozy family anecdote. Alan got a new house, hosted Thanksgiving, gave a speech that was a little intense, but heartfelt. They weren't about to talk about the gap in the table, or the look on Roy's face when I told him to find his own chair, or the way no one stood up for him, not even the ones who used to laugh the loudest. They didn't want to admit that the dynamic had shifted. That their punching bag now had keys to a home they couldn't influence. That the kid they mocked for being too soft now controlled the guest list. What they didn't realize was that Thanksgiving wasn't revenge. It was closure. Revenge is loud and messy and fueled by anger. This was quiet. Precise. Calculated in a way that was more introspective than vindictive. They had always underestimated me because I never shouted. I never snapped back with their energy. But this time, I didn't need to. I gave them everything they thought they wanted. The food. The ambience. The invitation. And in return, I gave them something they never expected. Reflection. Days later, I got a call from my mom. I let it go to voicemail. She sounded uncertain. Not angry. Not guilt-tripping. Just floating somewhere between discomfort and curiosity. Alan, I've been thinking about what you said, or didn't say, I guess. I don't know. Maybe we haven't always made you feel seen. Maybe we didn't know how. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. I guess, thank you. For hosting. For everything. I didn't call her back. Not because I was angry, but because for once, I didn't feel obligated to manage her discomfort. That night, I sat in the backyard under the string lights I'd hung weeks before, the same ones that lit up their wide-eyed faces when they arrived. I had a blanket, a glass of wine, and nothing to prove. It hit me then, in that quiet, golden silence. I was finally living a life that didn't orbit around their approval. They didn't get to define me anymore. Not with their group chat jokes. Not with their forced invitations. Not with their silences when I needed defending. They had entered my space, played by my rules, and left knowing something had changed, even if they couldn't say it out loud. The boy they once rolled their eyes at had grown into a man they didn't recognize. And maybe that scared them more than they'd ever admit. It's been a month since Thanksgiving. No new invites. No guilt-laced texts. Just silence. A different kind this time. Not the silence of dismissal. The silence of recognition. And here's the truth I've come to understand. The most powerful shift in any family dynamic doesn't come from yelling, or crying, or long, dramatic speeches. It comes from leaving the table and building your own. They used to say I was too sensitive. Now they just say nothing at all. And I've never been more at peace.